Mr. Gibson, would you like me to start?
Yeah, go ahead,
Or do you
Claire.
have something to say?
I have no real introduction. Go for it.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Before we begin, I want to just make sure that I want to thank the principals and the administrators who are joining us this evening. The Board of Education, thank you, Mr. Gibson, for your input and support so far in this process. And for Cabinet, Brian, Susan, and Julie, and the curriculum directors. Again, like I said, all the principals, especially Sandy and Carlos in my department, because they put a lot of work into this budget thus far, and I couldn't definitely do it without them. So thank you, guys. I'm going to go ahead and start. I keep forgetting to number the pages of the presentation because normally I'm doing this in front of people, and so I apologize that the presentation is not numbered, but the presentation should be online if you're viewing this live stream, and also the presentation was sent to the Zoom viewers, the administrators, and the Board of Education earlier today. So hopefully you've had a chance to review, and I'll be happy to answer as many questions as we go through this process. The presentation overview this evening, we're going to review just briefly from prior workshops, talk about the proposed operational revenues. SEG stands for State Equalization Guarantee, calculation detail of the 910B5. That is the State Equalization Guarantee funding formula. Proposed operational expenditures, significant budget impacts, K-5 plus and extended learning time applications, and then questions and discussions. So I want to start real briefly to just talk about the prior workshops. This is actually the third board workshop. We've met with Joe Guillen on March 26th, and he outlined the process and the approval for the Board of Education. We had our first board workshop on April 7th, where we really didn't have any numbers, and we kind of talked in general about the timeline and the process that we would be utilizing. April 14th, we had a parent public input meeting, and again, I want to thank the principals for submitting their PTC or parent involvement group from their school side. I thought that was a real success, and in most cases, that was more people who've attended our budget meetings than in the past, so thank you. On April 9th and 10th, there was a virtual spring budget workshop, and me and several of the administrators from the district attended the virtual workshop, listened to the presentations, and got some good information. I'll be sharing some of that with you guys here shortly. And then that brings us up to today, April 28th. This is the final board workshop concerning the budget. And then we will be asking for approval in May. The budget cycles and timeline slide just outlines from Supplement 1, and Supplement 1 is from the Public Education Manual of Procedures. It just talks about the cycle for the fiscal year. It begins July 1st and ends June 30th. And it requires that prior to June 20th of each year, each local school board shall, at a public hearing of which notice has been published by the local school board, approve the operating budget for the school district in the ensuing fiscal year. It must demonstrate public parental input, it must be balanced, and it must be approved by the Public Education Department prior to July 1. Our budget due date is May 19th. The initial unit value was set at $4,558.10. That is an increase of $155.83 over the current final unit value, or 3.39% increase. Total units, and we'll kind of talk about what this means and how we get at total units when we talk about the 910B5, but the total units for the district are 15,868.39, and that is a decrease of 101.58 units from the current year. Our total state equalization guarantee, and I also referred to it as the 910B5, that's the name of the public education form, is $75,150,522.54. So that is up from this current year, but we are down units. And again, we'll kind of go through that in a little bit more detail on a later slide. The operational revenues slide. These are the estimated 2019-20 revenues and the proposed 2021 operational revenues. So you have the object code, the description, and then the amount that we are proposing for our 2021 operational budget. Just to go down the list fairly quickly, but if you have any questions, please let me know. The 41,110 taxes, that is the operational portion of the mill levy taxes that we currently have in place in the district. Interest, this is bank interest that we receive. Miscellaneous revenue, fees, the amount that's proposed is budgeted lower than the estimated amount, and we always typically budget conservatively. Of course, these amounts aren't huge, so it's not a large ticket item either way, but we definitely want to budget them conservatively, and then in the event that we would have to increase revenue at mid-year, then we would do so. And then, of course, this SEG, to State Equalization Guarantee, that $75 million number is there, and that's taken from the 910B5. Impact aid is money that we receive for the Native American, the majority of the Native American students in our district. Indirect costs from the direct and federal side, those are directly related to federal programs that we have, and we're able to calculate a percentage of the federal programs back into the operational to capture some of the costs associated with facilitating those grants. And then sale of personal property would be when we get rid of an asset and we go through the public auction process in order to get rid of that asset. And then if we have any revenue, then we have to book it to the sale of personal property. So that total is $75,738,520.46. That amount is what we wanted to build the budget based off of, so that way our current revenues equal our current expenditures. And you will notice that there's a cash line there. The cash has not been finalized at this time. We will finalize the cash prior to the board's final approval and submission to the state, but at this particular time, we're still in the process of finalizing our expenditures for the current year and figuring our cash balance. And we wanted to just make sure that we completed the budget process without utilizing a whole lot of cash. And I'll kind of talk about that in a minute for obvious reasons with some looming cuts in the future. We want to make sure that we safeguard our assets as best as possible. Are there any questions, board members, on the operational revenue proposal?
Nope.
So the next few slides actually is the state equalization guarantee calculation spreadsheet, and it's broken down to several pages, so we can kind of talk individually about what goes into the state equalization calculation and how our budget is funded. So we have a district program budget, and I didn't want to forget to thank Elena. Elena's worked really hard on making sure that all of our numbers are accurate and correct. So I wanted to thank you, Elena, and the curriculum office for your assistance in this process as well. So this is kind of when I call it the SEG machine, because it basically takes our student counts, and when it's all said and done, it converts them from students to units. So you would picture us, dumping the kids into a little machine and then cranking it. And as they go through this process, they transfer from students to units. So right here, it talks about, and this number is calculated based on the average of our 80th and 120th day student counts. So these are actually counts. We take all of the information, we have to submit it and certify it at the state level, and that's what comes out with our column that's called basic student units and total by grade level. So on the bottom of that first sheet, you have a total MEM. So the students are now members, and we have 8,245. That is the average of our 80th and 120th day. That number is down 62.75 members or students over last year's calculation. And that seemed to be fairly accurate with what we saw all year long. We were slightly down in student enrollment on all of our count days. Going on to page 2 of the SEG calculation, and this actually takes, again, the students by grade level, and there's a cost index factor right in the middle of the page. So depending on what grade students are in, the cost index factor that's multiplied by the number of students and then outcomes program units. Under kindergarten, we are slightly down this year from last year's kindergarten. We're down 32.76 units. Right in the middle of the page, we have a T&E index and TCI index. We spent time last meeting going through the T&E index and the calculation, how that's calculated and why it's important. And this is exactly why it's important, because it is a multiplier. So once we have our total membership program units, we apply the weighted factor of our T&E, Training and Experience Index, and TCI, which is our Teacher Cost Index. The average of those is how they calculate the staffing cost multiplier, and then the staffing cost multiplier is an equation of the membership times the staffing cost multiplier to get the adjusted basic program units. The adjusted basic program units are down 138.65 from last year. And that's, again, a combination of us being down students and also the T&E cost multiplier down slightly from last year. On the bottom of that page, it talks about our special education students and the factors associated with them. Our adjusted ancillary FTE, those are a lot of our ancillary department staff gets counted in there. And we have a total special education units, and our total special education units right at the bottom of that page is actually up 5.25 units from last year. So although we're down in students, we're up slightly in special ed units. Page 3 of the SEG calculation talks about the elementary fine arts program, and that is Erica Hidalgo is real instrumental in that program, and her and Sandy work for the fine arts program on establishing a budget and identifying costs associated with our finance programs at the elementary level. That program, fine arts program unit, is down 6.925 units. Again, that would be related to the fact that we were down students, because that's an average number of our elementary fine arts program. And then our bilingual program units are down 54.375 units. And that is a result of, there have been several bilingual programs that have gone away at the district level, and I believe this year we only had one elementary bilingual program. And I know Casey Honor was involved in that, and we looked at that information closely. Elementary PE program units are right towards the middle of that page. That information is up from this current year's elementary PE units, it's up 24.48. Certified board teachers, we get an additional factor for national board certified teachers, but we are down 4 teachers from last year, or four staff members from last year, and that was probably due specifically to either people leaving or retirements. The only other significant number on the bottom of that page is the at-risk units. And those of you that have, kept up with the legislation and a lot of the budget information that's coming out, is at-risk units are very, very popular. And our at-risk units are up 197.34. There's a whole lot more regulations and accountability for our at-risk population. And I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later in some of the budget documents that we'll have to submit with the budget, but everybody's real interested in how we're going to spend our at-risk units, and our office, in conjunction with the curriculum and the special ed and personnel office, are going to be working real hard to make sure that we identify our at-risk population and make sure that the funding is accurately coded to support those students.
Claire?
Yes.
Can you go back to your last page where on the certified teachers? And please be patient with me because I'm still learning this. You mentioned we're down on our certified teachers. Is that formula that you were talking about to me back a while back, on how those certified teachers affect the whole school and the administration on that funding on that school? Is that the one you're talking?
There's 2 pages on page 2 of the SUT calculation. In the middle of that page, there's on here it's identified as T&E index and TCI index. That is directly related to our training and experience index for our certified staff. And the TCI index is very specific just to teachers. It's called a teacher cost index. So that is down 0.006% from this current year, and that is probably directly related to teachers with a lot of training and experience retiring or leaving the district, and us replacing them with new teachers, and also the alternative teaching license individuals come in with typically less years of experience in education than teachers who are retiring.
So you're telling me we lost 4 overall?
No, so let me go to that next page, page 3 of the SEG calculation. There, halfway through the middle of that page, it's national board certified teachers. So there's a national board certified certification process that teachers they pass a test, they're nationally accredited, and then we're able to count them on this form, and they receive a factor which generates some additional units for the district. Last year we had 12. This year we have 8. So we're down 4 individuals. I believe those were specifically due to retirements, but it may have been a teacher that left the district as well. I don't have those names right in front of me, so I'm not exactly.
Okay, no, I'm just trying to figure out the funding formula. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry. Thank you, Claire. I'll ask you some more questions offline. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Any other questions on the page 3, specific to at-risk or any of the other units? Page 4, SEG calculation. This is if we had growth units in this calculation, that's where they would be captured. We also have some charter school students that participate in some of our extracurricular activities, and homeschool students that may participate in extracurricular activities that could be athletics. So we get a couple of little units there. And then right in the middle of the page, we have our extended learning time program units. The program units generated here are 902.88. So that is directly related to the application. that we put in district-wide for our extended learning time program. So I know the principals are real familiar with that. If there's any questions specific to the units generated from the board members, please let me know, and I will probably have Elena and Casey and Erica assist with that portion. And then also right underneath that is the K-5 plus program units. So this current year is the first year that they had K-5 plus and extended learning time included in our state equalization guarantee. Otherwise, K-5 plus used to be a separate fund that we had to apply for and account for. Now it's included in our state equalization guarantee. And likewise with the extended learning time, last year was the first year that the legislation awarded money for an extended learning time program. We applied for it district-wide, which is the current calendar that we are on this year, which was 190 days for our staff, or for several of our staff members, our certified staff, and 184 days, I believe, for students. Is that correct?
I think it's 183.
183? Okay, thank you, Elena. So we're on a 183 day for students and 190 day for certified staff. And this application we submitted this year also would be on a 190 day calendar and 183 days for students. Elena's saying yes, so I'm gonna say we're good with that. When you add up all of our program units, we are at a grand total of 15,868.392 times the current unit value. That's the new unit value, up 3.39% over this current year, which gives us total program costs of $75,503,395.98. If you go to page 5, and sorry, I just felt it was real important that we talk about all the units specific and individual to the SUT calculation, since it's 99% of our operational budget. If you go to page 5, then the state does take credit for some non-categorical revenue, and that actually gets to the bottom line, which is our state equalization guarantee. That's $75,150,522.54. So that number is directly related to the number that you saw on the revenue. That's 99% of the operational revenue, and all the other revenues combined are fairly insignificant besides the SEG. Is there any question about the revenue or the state equalization formula? On the next page, we'll talk about the operational expenditures by function. So this is the operational expenditures at the function level summary. This is typically what we've put out in the past. This is typically what we want to talk about. And then this year, knowing that we had 3 new board members, the slides following will kind of go into more detail. But just at the function level, we have 56.36% of the budget into direct instruction. That's directly related to students, direct instruction, student teaching. I don't necessarily, I won't go through all the percentages, but I want to note that the direct instruction, support service for students and support service for instruction make up over 70% of the operational budget. So that just ensures that more than 70% of our revenue goes directly to support student learning and teaching. Central administration, school site administration, and if you add in the school site administration, we're up almost at 79% of our budget directly related to the individual school sites. The central services, that makes up the business office, the or personnel office, technology, and warehouse. Then you have the maintenance and operation. That makes up 13.86% of the budget. Transportation, Wilsona Schools has supported the transportation budget for all of the 10 years that I have been in this position. The non-operational 2900 function, that would be any emergency reserves and I believe Medicaid funding that we support for the schools. Food service, the food service amount that's in our operational budget is specifically related to the basically when the parents don't pay for their students' lunch bill, then we go back and have a little bit of reserves in order to help support that. And the $50,000 in capital outlay is directly related to vehicle purchase, and I'll talk about that when we get into more detail. So just at the function level, are there any questions? I'm going to go through the detail by function sections fairly quickly, not within a whole lot of detail. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. In all the functions, we do have salary and benefits, professional development. In this particular case, in the 1,000, we have graduation and other, student travel and employees travel, contract services, textbooks, supplies, assets, postage, and then that gives you a total. And then all of the categories are broken out by the percentage of that budget within that function. Each of the subsequent slides talk specifically about the individual functions, support services for students, again, salary and benefits, contracted ancillary, travel, supply, assets, postage. So typically the supply budgets, and I'm sorry, I didn't mention that on the first page, is the supply budgets that are given to the school sites are all broken out based on the number of students at each school. So we actually utilize the 80th and 120th day average that we're funded off of, and that's put into a spreadsheet that Sandy is responsible for and does a great job of taking the amount that we allocate for supplies and then splitting it out by the individual school sites based on the number of kids that are at each school. So if there's a variance between one elementary to another, it's probably because of the number of students. The same with the secondary level. The budgets are based on the number of students. The support service instruction line items, again, there's salary and benefits, professional development. And I wanted to say that in professional development, a lot of this is directly related to the ELT program. And with the ELT program, we have pretty specific areas that we have to support with our ELT money, and professional development is one of them. We have to provide 80 additional hours of professional development, and that is what you will see kind of split throughout the budget. $2,300 general administration. This salary and benefits, professional development, your professional services, that's where you may have your legal bill and your audit for the entire district. So it's not just specific to central office. It just that that's where we capture. And last time we spent a good portion of one of the workshops talking about the chart of accounts and the allowable expenditures within each function. And so that is where we have to capture. That's a lot of times why we have it split out the way we do, is because based on the uniform chart of accounts, that's what's allowable in this particular function. Election costs are captured in this function as well. Equipment rental, and if you see that kind of throughout, then that a lot of times has to do with the equipment that we lease, and that is specific to our copiers. Board expense, employee travel, contract services and supplies, assets and postage. School administration would capture the administrative costs, the principals and assistant principals and office staff, professional development. Again, here's a equipment rental portion, these are for the copiers that are in the workrooms and at the school sites. Travel, contract services, and supply assets and postage. $2,500 central services, again, a breakout of salaries and benefits, professional development, maintenance and repairs, travel, contract services, advertising. The advertising in this particular function would be specific to when we post for positions in the local newspapers and in different places. And again, supplies, assets, and postage. Operations and maintenance of plant. You have custodial and maintenance salaries and benefits in here. Utilities. So the reason why this function is typically higher is because of the utility costs. That's $2.8 million. And also the property liability insurances are captured in this function, and that is $1.6 million. Other than that, you have travel, contract services, supplies and materials, uniforms, and postage. Student transportation, this is the operational support for our transportation fund. So we will capture some of the salary and benefits for our transportation staff, transportation contractors, property liability insurance on our buses. And buses is, I believe that's maintenance and repair on our buses. The 2,900 other support services has an emergency reserves of $885,000 and a state match for our Medicaid funding of $10,000. Food service operations is captured under other charges. And again, that's directly related to students who have outstanding debt on their school lunches. And capital outlay is vehicles general, and a couple of years back we made a commitment and a priority to replace 2 SRO vehicles per year. This is where we capture the SRO vehicle costs for 2 vehicles on an annual basis. That brings us down to the $75,738,521 operational budget. The next slide talks about significant budget items, and something that I wanted to kind of read through that we were, when we attended our virtual spring budget workshop, is we did have a message from Dr. Ryan Stewart and also Deputy Secretary Don Delgado, and I just wanted to kind of go through some of the notes that I captured related to the preparation of this year's budget and any changes or challenges that we want to basically prepare for. Dr. Stewart talked about the House Bill 5 changes in the program codes and the uniform chart of accounts. They're very much more detailed out when it comes to the extended learning time, at-risk program units, and K5 plus, and no, maybe that's it. So this year's budget obviously has many challenges. Right now we're in the middle of the pandemic with the coronavirus, social distancing going on. Still too early to know exactly all that is going to be affected with that in place. There is a looming possible special session given the oil and gas prices where there are. You guys have probably read a lot about that in the newspaper, and that is definitely unknown, and we want to be conservative and prepare for any possible session that would reduce our, either sweep some of our cash or reduce our operational expenditures or operational revenue in any way. There's also a CARES Act that at that particular time there wasn't a whole lot of information that was fairly new, and they talked about they will get information to the districts on how that money will be distributed and how we're in the process, or how we can apply for CARES Act money so that we receive less of a cut when necessary. And something that we were asked to do is maintain operational flexibility. Actually, he said be flexible multiple times. The statute will make sure that we certify that we have an average 4% raise into our budgets, and that we are required to provide the use of at-risk funds, and also make sure that we are supporting our instructional materials allocation out of the state equalization guarantee. Be conservative, be flexible. Probably want to stay away from implementing any new programs. We want to work in collaboration with all the stakeholders in order to move forward and achieve our goals of educating the students of Wilson schools. Any questions on that information? The significant budget items slide talks about the average increase, 4% increase. And right now, Carlos has worked on the salary schedules, and right now we can confirm that there is an average 4% raise for our employees. The average language gives us a little bit of flexibility, which means that in some cases, an employee may receive a little bit more than a 4% raise. Some may receive a little bit less than a 4% raise. We have to certify that we have average 4% raise, but right now all the salary schedules have a 4% raise included in their step. The medical insurance increase of 8.7%. There are no changes to the dental or vision plan, and how that breaks down for an individual who has family coverage, family high option coverage would be an additional $47.89 per check. So it doesn't necessarily work that they're going to receive less money, because the 4% increase to their salary is greater than the 8.7% increase to the premium. But at the highest level, if you have Blue Cross Blue Shield family coverage, then you will see an $47.89 increase to your paycheck. New request from PED to label budgets by program codes designated for regular ed, special ed, at-risk, art, K-5 plus, and ELT. So we've talked about that. There's a very extensive budget program questionnaire that needs to accompany this budget when we submit it to the state, and we have to identify expenditures for all of these areas and make sure that we code them appropriately. K5 / extended learning time. This was just to kind of highlight and again talk specifically about those program units and the revenue that they generate. We did apply for the K5 Plus program and extended learning time program, like we mentioned before. I know Erica's worked on a K5 Plus calendar, and there are 4 elementaries that are included in that application. She'd be best able to answer any questions related to that. But right now, since we are still in our current mode of social distancing and the schools are closed, then we will have to kind of tread through that issue as we get closer to June, when that program is scheduled to start. That's really all I have prepared. In conclusion, I just want to reiterate that over 75% of our expenditures goes to the direct instruction of our students. We will budget cash very conservatively with the looming special session and oil and gas prices where there's a lot of unknowns, and our first priority will be to make sure we are able to, as best as possible, absorb any cuts that come our way, either through a cash sweep or a special session that reduces the amount of money we receive from the SEG. Our priority again will be to save our positions in the district, but right now everything everything else is for the most part flat. All the budgets were prepared with supplies and materials, basically given the same amount of priority as they were last year. And so, like I said, if your school receives a little bit more or a little bit less supply money, that would be directly related to the amount of students, the number of students at your school site. So if your school site was down this year, then next year you might receive a little bit less. But otherwise, they were all prepared on a flat basis. Mr. Baca and the personnel office, Alicia and Andrew, they have communicated with the principals their staffing allocations, and my understanding is that is flat right now. There's no new proposed positions in this budget, and there are also no there's no positions that we are reducing from this budget. It's maintaining what we currently have in place, given the legislative priorities of the 4% increase. And that's pretty much it.
Claire, before we sign off, this is Steve Otero. Just a question, like, so I guess this budget on the employee salaries is based on total contract days, correct?
Yes.
So on how hard would it, and this just is not something that we got to look now, just a food for thought on this one. How hard and how much of an effect will it have if we were to give our aides, teachers, nurses, pretty much anything that has aides at the end of it, other than maybe the bus drivers, extend the contract days to be equal to the teacher? Because to my understanding that they come to help at times with where their teachers kind of volunteer, but yet hard to get compensated for it in like comp time or anything else like that. Would that affect the budget real bad or a lot if they were to be even considered to give extended contract days to match the teachers' contract days?
Carlos or Sandy, are you on the line?
Yeah.
So, well, I think my question for you guys, though, is I just wanted to make sure that there are several classifications that are at 190-day contracts, and there are a few that are not. And so we would probably need to look at which classifications are not on the 190-day and then do an analysis of adding those days. But that was my question to Carlos, is if they're a classified position that's not on a 190-day, how many contract days do they currently have?
They're at 184.
Okay.
So I guess just my concern is, or even thought is that they're asked, these aides that normally stay and with a smile at the end of the year to help teachers pack up and do their stuff. Office aides, same thing, you know. So it's just something that I personally would like to see. If there's a possibility that if it wouldn't affect the budget that much, but I think it would help everyone all the way around, teachers, principals, everybody, to have that additional help because they work with each other so much. They know the steps they take just to look at it, I mean, I'm not saying it has to happen. It's just something that I think that we need to kind of look at.
Mr. Otero, I will, yes, Carlos and myself and Sandy, we will get with Mr. Gibson and we will have that conversation and look at that, what that would cost for those classifications of employee that are currently on a 184-day contract. We will look at that data.
I greatly appreciate it.
Is that an issue of collective bargaining, Claire?
So all the salary schedules do go through the process of collective bargaining, and I did want to mention, and I don't know if Margot is on. Margot Rivera, are you on? She may not be. Yeah, the collective bargaining process has not taken place, and we will look at the salary schedules with that group. I know that I personally was working with the classified individuals, and there were some changes that we were going to recommend. Those recommendations will have to take place during the course of the bargaining, and In some cases, that would mean that some individuals would receive a slightly higher raise than the 4%. And again, then we would decide whether that was affordable or not, given our budget.
Also, Claire, is that an issue of regulation? And Elena, you may be the best one to answer that question. Are there regulations around who works 90 days versus the 183 or 84?
I don't believe that's finished around regulation, but I think Mr. Baca, Brian Baca's on the call as well, and he might be able to answer that.
You know, I was thinking that some of that might be because teachers were given extra days in ELT money for professional development days.
Yeah, that is correct.
You would not
That was what I was kind of asking about.
on those days.
Is there a regulation about who gets professional development on those days?
I think that one of the things, Mr. Gibson, is that as part of the ELT requirement, we had to have 80 hours of professional development, which is why that we needed the additional days without students in order to be compliant with that grant. So that is why that staff group or category, we were added the extra contract days.
So those extra days are actually the 80 hours of PD for the most part?
Yes, sir.
Well, honestly, that's the case. I'm not saying the exact same days, but I know that if there's a possibility that maybe they get 4 days added to the contract, 2 days before school to help set up and get things done, and then 2 days after school to help break down. That doesn't necessarily have to mean, I guess I took it as 84 days and 190 days. So that's 6 days. So I'm sure there's some days in there that are, probably dedicated to the professional development, but it's just something to look at.
Yeah,
I think that it's just something that would be good for the aides, that probably one of our lowest paid staff members, and we can't give them a raise maybe like everybody else, or a higher raise, but if we can add days to the contract days, that might be, I think it'd help the district also. It's not just to help them. Thank you.
Claire, this is Dave Vickers. I just want to say thank you to you and your staff for all the hard work you put into this. This must be really tearing your hair out season, especially since you're not even sure what the budget's going to be coming from the state. So congratulations to you guys on all your hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers, and I think that was something that the state made very clear, that even though there's looming budget cuts happening right now, what we are required to do is, based off of the legislative session, adhere to the 4% increase and the operational revenues that we currently have, and prepare a balanced budget and submit it.
Claire?
Yes.
This is Eno Giron. On page 20, on your first bullet, you state all employees on average to receive a 4% raise. I don't know if this question is for you, or it's for our personnel, or it's for Mr. Gibson, but how is it determined who gets the raise? Is it under a collective bargaining agreement, or is this through performance, or how do you guys determine who gets a raise and who doesn't get the raise?
Everybody.
Who's that question for?
I'm going to answer, and then I'll let Mr. Gibson and Mr. Baca add in. But all the employees except administrators are on a salary schedule, and the salary schedule is based off of a matrix based on your experience and probably education level. In all of those cells, we have included a 4% raise from. And this is just one example. If they were currently on step 2, next year they'll move to step 3. There's a 4% increase in step 2 to step 3. And that's the way all of the salary schedules were prepared. We've worked hard over the last couple of years to try to have consistency within the salary schedules so that the steps are equal. And then once you go horizontally across it with additional education, that those steps are also, the percentage increase is also consistent and fair and equitable with that same salary schedule. And Carlos, you want to add anything to that?
No, you're exactly right. And then as far as classified staff, pretty much like everybody across the board is getting classified staff is getting a 4% increase. The only ones that are a little tricky is the certified, because of the matrix of the salary schedule because of, I believe it was 5 or 6 years ago, we chose to put more money in the bottom corner of the salary schedule. So that's where some people are getting like 3.9 or a 4.2%, but it all averages out to the 4% when it's all said and done.
And yeah, right, we did that specifically when we were trying to get people to go on to get their additional education hours so that it would help our T&E index, which then generates additional revenue for the district. So yes, in the certified staff, those salary schedules have a little bit of variation between them, but right now this budget is prepared with the salary schedules at an average 4% increase.
Okay, so my question again was, I just want to make sure I'm clear that I get it. It's not on performance and it's not on collective bargaining.
That is correct.
And also, Mr. Hidon, this is Brian, and that Clara and I will be meeting with the leadership from NEA so that we can go over the salary schedules with them and explain as far as the differences. But everybody is getting, as you, Clara said, the average is 4%, and it's not based on any kind of performance or merit pay. It's basically how they fall on the years of experience and their training, which category they go over. So we'll be meeting with the NEA leadership later here before the final budget is submitted to the state on the 12th. That way we're able to get contracts out for our employees before their last contract day.
Mr. Baca, Brian Baca, do you have like a matrix or something that you're working off of on how you distribute that? And if you do, could you forward that to me?
Yes, sir. At this point, actually, the matrix is prepared by Carlos Castillo, and as far as Sandy, they're the ones that they have the format and the cells, and that we have them in draft now. And until we meet down with NEA and they sign off on it, and we get the signatures there. But we do have the draft ones that they talked about that they had prepared earlier. We just haven't sat down with NEA to get their approval yet, but we do have them in draft.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just have a couple of comments. One, I would be interested in that matrix as well, and the other one is whether it's collective bargaining, whether it isn't, whatever steps need to be taken. I would like to see the possibility of adding the 6 days to the 184-day contract. And if it can't be done, just explain it to us why it can't be done. If it involves NEA or however that works, I think it would be beneficial for us at least to have that information so we'll know why we can or cannot make this thing possible. So those are the two primary concerns I have. I don't have any more concerns about it.
Mr. Smith, yes, I will, yes, we will work to identify the job classes that are not currently working 190 days and establish what that cost, what that would look like in terms of cost and in the budget. So we will have that, we will prepare that for you.
Perfect, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Baca, for getting that matrix done, or Carlos and Sandy as well.
And so I guess just for clarification, Mr. Smith and Mr. Hidon, are you asking to see the draft salary schedules? Is that what you're asking for?
I don't know exactly what Mr. Hidon's asking for. Sometimes I don't, but what I'm asking for is just, I guess, an explanation of how it's determined. And I understood what Mr. Baca said about the years of experience and everything else like that. But is years of experience and education the primary factors that go into that, I guess, is what my question is.
Yeah, yes. And so like I said, we have the draft salary schedules, and yes, if you're not familiar with what they look like, I'm going to put it up on the screen, but I don't know that the online viewers are going to be able to see that. But I mean, that constitutes what the matrix looks like for a salary schedule. And you have steps down here. Those are actually related to years of experience. And then across, you have levels of education, which might be bachelor's 15, master's 15, and master's 45. So that's what they all typically look like, but they all, start and end with a different number based on the level.
Okay, yeah, so So I guess, is there a guideline that says base your average 4% raise in your district on this? If that makes any sense at all. Does it say, take into account the educational level, take into account the time the person has been in the district? Is there something that says this is how you factor this to add up to your average 4%?
The average language on House Bill 5 just says exactly that the employees that we have to certify, Mr. Gibson will have to certify that our budget submitted will have an average 4% salary increase to all the different level of job classes in the budget. There's a worksheet 4 and a worksheet 5. Those are the public education department's forms that we have to submit, that we have to make sure that we have all the current employees where they currently are at the salary schedule, and then when we move them up a year, then that year step, when that worksheet 5 is done, there's a 4% average salary increase. So we actually have to supply the state with documentation to support that our salary schedules and our employees are receiving an average 4% increase.
Okay, perfect. That makes sense to me.
So Brian.
Me?
Yes, sir. Smith, Mr. President. Sorry, Mr. President. Would it be fair that anything that's shared with you and Mr. Giron can be shared with the board as a whole?
Absolutely. Mr. Baca can send that out, correct?
Yes, sir. I think that once we get those, with those drafts, we'll get them from the finance departments and we'll make sure they're available for the board prior to, so for your review, prior to sending them out to the NEA.
Perfect. Perfect. So those answered my questions quite well, actually. Any more questions? Input?
I would like to say that very thorough and uninterrupted presentation Claire gave us, and I think it was a great presentation. And you have a great staff, looks like. They answer you right at the drop of a dime, so that's pretty good. So thank you all.
Thank you.
No more comments or questions? Well, I too would like to thank all of you for participating and taking time out of your day to sit here with us and explain things to us. There's one thing that's common. We all talk about what a wonderful job you guys do, and I want you to know that. You're the best in the state. We firmly believe that. So we appreciate everything you do. If there's no more questions, Claire, thank you for the presentation. Thank your staff. And I believe we're done here. Is that correct, Mr. Gibson?
Yes, good job, Claire.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith, Brian.
Yes, sir.
If I have any other further questions, do you want me to direct them through you on an email or to you and to Mr. Gibson, or how do you guys want these questions?
So Mr. Hidon, today was your chance. So if you have questions afterwards that you missed it, you're no longer allowed to ask questions after today. Send them to me and I will pass them on. If that's the way you guys would like it. It doesn't matter to me, but I would kind of like to be made aware. So if you send them to me, I will make sure that I get them to Mr. Gibson and to Claire and whoever else can answer your questions. And that way they can share it with the entire board. We are not allowed to send emails to the entire board, so it works better that way. So any board members that have questions, send it to me. I'll send it up to Claire and Mr. Gibson. They can reply all and give us the answers we want.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, if that's it, everybody have a good night. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Joe, Claire?